I'm honored to be at this esteemed group of people. So let's get this thing started. So the topic I was given, we've been given to talk about is metrics, right? And so I think this is an interesting panel, partly because of the fact that there's three very, very different groups and types of companies, right? So Leo, you run a social media sort of software company, growing like a weed, fully remote, love what you guys do. We have Stacy from TaskRabbit, so marketplace for talent? Maybe what's the best way to say it? Expertise of all types. We also have Dave from WeWork, which is probably one of the fastest growing co-working, probably is the fastest and biggest co-working sort of like company on the planet, and we use them in 2 or 3 cities, I believe. So awesome stuff. And also, he used to be an architect, so his company was actually purchased by WeWork. So very, very interesting background. And so I'm going to kick it off with a easy question. What are the most important metrics for your business these days? And I'll cut you off if you start going too long. Anybody? Or ladies first? Ladies first.
Sure.
Ladies first.
Thank you. Well, we're a marketplace, and so we care about supply and demand. TaskRabbit is a 2-sided marketplace where you can outsource all your chores and get things done. So as with any marketplace, we actually care about the unit economics. So the most important thing we care about is revenue and how much money we're making on a per task basis. And knowing what the unit economics are helps us determine what our gross margin is on those tasks, which teaches us how much we can spend on marketing and customer acquisition costs. Beyond that, we care about lifetime value. So for every consumer, we're a consumer-based company. For every consumer, we want to know how long they're going to be with us, what their retention is, and how long they're going to stay, and how much money they're going to spend over time to make sure that when we pay to acquire them and what we pay actually pays off in the long run.
Okay, awesome. Dave, how about yourself?
For us, we keep a clear eye on the business metrics. Since I'm more focused on the product side of the business, I obviously have to care about the financials, but I really tune into how our product's being used. So I'm looking at things like keycard swipes, conference room booking, how long our members are staying, the duration of their membership, because I want to make sure that our product is satisfying all of their physical needs. So an indicator of that is that they're sticking around longer. So those are some of the key metrics for us.
How about you?
Yeah, we are a typical SaaS company. So in SaaS, luckily, a lot of things are mathematically, well worked out. Obviously, we care about MRR, monthly recurring revenue, a lot. One metric I'm particularly excited about myself that I get a lot of value out of is our activation metric. So, especially in startups, I see a lot of times, we all know by now, Dave McClure's our metrics, right? Activation, acquisition, activations, retention, revenue, so forth. And what I find is activation is oftentimes a very misunderstood metric, right? It's if someone does any action, they're activated, right? Whereas we've spent a lot of time at Buffer to figure out what is true activation. We call it true activation. Yeah. And at Buffer, that's, we know if someone has posted, so we help people post to social media. So if someone posts 15 times in the first week after signing up, there's a very high correlation of that person being active 3 months later, right? So that's one of the most meaningful metrics for us because it's a leading indicator for retention, right? So that means we don't have to wait for 3 months to see whether the person is active. So activation is actually something that's really meaningful for us. Of course, MRR keeps us alive and breathing.
And I know you guys are super, super transparent, right? So great that you guys are keeping track of these metrics. Are these metrics shared company-wide or within just the top management? How does the rest of the organization know sort of how you're doing?
Yeah, so everyone in this room can go and check on our metrics right now. You can go to buffer.bearmetrics.com and it's our live revenue dashboard. You literally see every person that's paying us by the minute. So if you want to see that right now. So we are super transparent. We go by the idea that, if you want to make the people on your team make good decisions, right, you need to give them all the data, right? And so we give people just plain and simple all the data there is. In fact, that's actually sometimes not that useful. You need to help them actually understand the data, especially when you have lots and lots of data. You need to actually help them slice and dice the data better for them to make good decisions. But generally, absolutely everyone at Buffer has access to all the numbers from our bank balance to, everyone in this room as well. So if you have ideas for some of our metrics, please speak to me afterwards. Yeah.
Don't know if I recommend all companies do that, but it's very great. It's awesome, great. How about yourself, Stacy?
So our metrics are not available to everybody in the room, but they are available to everyone in the company. So we do something quarterly called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, where we track our metrics once a quarter, we set targets, we set goals, and then once a month we have a report out on those metrics to the team. As a weekly executive team, we look at a scorecard that has a bunch of numbers on it, and that's the first thing we do. We do like a check-in and see how everybody's doing, and then we look at the financials right away before we get into anything else on the agenda. And then we have a weekly stand-up. The whole company gets together, and every single week we actually talk about the customer. We look at Net Promoter Score, and we look at the Net Promoter Score of our clients, who are the people who pay for services and get things done on TaskRabbit, and our taskers who do the work. And we look at something good and something bad, and we look at the overall data. And that's the one metric that we care about for the whole company, because if we're not focused every single day on providing a good experience in the marketplace, we're not succeeding.
And Dave, much more complicated with buildings,
our
right?
metrics are tricky. It's a lot of different aspects. But what we've really tried to build a data-driven culture. And every department kind of has their key metrics that they look at. And when you go into their offices and their different spaces, you see screens on every office with different dashboards. So like for our operational group, it's support tickets. How long are we turning over if the Wi-Fi goes down? Or the air conditioning's the wrong temperature and people want it changed. Oftentimes in commercial buildings, you can't give people access to that. So you have to sort of put in a request. And so like that's ops groups look at those kinds of things. For us, it's how many buildings we're opening. What's our pipeline look like? How long is it taking us to go from when we sign a lease to when we do drawings to when we get our construction permit to when we open the building. And then the time after that to when we close out the building. So a lot of those key metrics. And then obviously there's our financial metrics for the business. And we're getting better and better about making them more transparent, the entire company. I think that's kind of a shift in the way that we're thinking about things. Again, kind of just because there were different buildings had different metrics and there was a lot of things that drove them. It's not just one product. So we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we publish those metrics, because we don't want people thinking that that they're not performing or something. It's things that are completely out of their control. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do it, but the goal is to be as transparent as possible with our staff, probably not externally, with as many of our metrics as we can.
How many metrics is too many, right? Because we're all talking about you, Lily, and I have lots of companies I've invested in. They have this dashboard of like 50 metrics, and they end up not really paying attention to all of them. And we have another one, which is like one metric that matters, where it's like, this is just what we all should be focusing on, using sort of our metrics. Like, what do you guys think is sort of, as an audience full of startups, like, what is the right number of metrics? And I know it depends. Is it 3? Is it 8? Is it 50? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think at Buffer, we're still figuring some of this stuff out. But I really like the single focus metric, per team. This is like this last week, I went through some OKRs with some teams. We use OKRs as well. I think that's a really helpful system. And some of those teams were working on 2 metrics at the same time. For example, our blog team was working on conversions and on traffic. Trying to grow traffic, and they're trying to conversion from the blog to Buffer signups. And I sat down with them and said, like, we want both those metrics to grow, right? And both of those matter, but on a per quarter basis, I just don't think we can execute on both of them. So we made the tough call, and we said, like, let's cut one of them, right? Let's really zone in on traffic, right? It's just, that's what, and make that meaningful traffic, right? Like, let's make that, the people that actually stick around. And let's not, when I say that, like, still keep in check with the conversion metric, but you don't run experiments on that for that quarter, right? So I really like the single metric focus on a per team basis, and anything more than one, I just think you're diverting your attention too much, and that's how I think about it.
How about you, Stacy?
So I believe you accomplish what you measure. So you shouldn't be looking at a metric that you're not measuring anything against. So if it's just on there just to have, probably shouldn't be on there. Our sheet for our executive team is, I think, 5 metrics. Some of them are like calculations of other metrics, but those 5 metrics actually have targets against them, and we know if we're ahead of target or behind target on something, we know how to drill down into it. I think that's different for teams. So we have a tasker operations team that's responsible for recruiting and retention of the taskers who provide the services, and they have a giant spreadsheet that is at the category of service and the market level. So if we figure out that fulfillment, which is the chance that a task gets done, is down, we need to be able to drill down. That team needs to be able to drill down and figure out it's cleaning in London. cleaning tasks in London are down because we have so much demand and we don't have enough taskers. And so now we need to go out and find more taskers who are good at cleaning. Like having a high-level metric on a category like that would make no sense. You can't act on it. So it has to actually be actionable too.
I'm actually in the process of trying to figure out how to implement OKRs for like a interior design team. You know, what's an OKR for? You know, and a lot of it is around sort of procurement and how we're doing on the purchasing of furniture and things like that. And also it takes 6 months to build a building, so it's not like we're measuring conversion. Like it's a really tricky thing, but that's coming from a little bit of a technology background. That's what I'm trying to do is bring that to our teams. And I really like the idea of one metric per team. I just think you start to get spread too thin and trying to affect too many things. So there's a lot of metrics on the board right now, but I'm actually trying to consolidate them. It's an active, like it's something that I feel like I'm tuning at the moment.
And all three of your businesses are at very, very different stages, in the process of growth. Are there any tools that you recommend that might be helpful for folks in the audience that you love? You mentioned Barometrics, right? Awesome product. Anything that you guys use specifically, or have you built it in-house to track? Just curious.
So we use a tool called Looker. When I joined TaskRabbit, we had a team of people who would do a lot of data crunching and Microsoft Excel and put together PowerPoint presentations to demonstrate that information. And it became a bottleneck for needing data to make decisions. And so we found this great little company called Looker, where it's basically an application that sits on top of an SQL database that you just need to know the very base. If you've ever used Microsoft Access or any simple data querying tools, then you can use Looker. And so what that did was enabled everybody in the company to be able to use and consume and analyze all the data we have to bear in our marketplace. And as you can imagine, we have like millions and millions of records of transactions between clients and taskers as a consumer business. And so it forced people to do that in a way that when you go and now make a decision, you actually are using real data around it, and no one makes decisions without the data, because you can't say, well, I don't have the information because I'm waiting on somebody from another team. No, you've taught yourself how to use Looker. You can actually go in there and find it yourself.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to check it out, Looker.
Yeah, I don't need to add too much because that's exactly what we do. We use Looker for the exact same reasons that Stacy just explained, so I don't have too much to add. The only thing I would probably add is some of the startups in this room who haven't, got Looker costs a bit of money, and so if you don't have that money, there's other tools that are cheaper, that are more like early stage. Over time, I've not turned into a huge fan of event-based, tools where you send your, you add some JavaScript to your code and you send it to but still stuff like Mixpanel or Kissmetrics or those are still I think valuable things to use. Again, if you can afford it, it's just for the reason Looker is great because it just sits on top of you don't sending data anywhere. It's
what do you guys think about Google Analytics in the early days? I know a lot of startups use Google Analytics. A lot of our companies use them.
Do we use it?
Yeah. Have you used it?
We use it for the blog mostly. Yeah, we don't use it too much for the SaaS stuff. That's all Looker. Yeah.
Dave, do you guys use any tools over there or all in-house?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the big part was tracking. I wish I could put a JavaScript in a building. So there's no embed codes for key cards. So we've had to build a lot of our own software to do a lot of the tracking and a lot of the aggregation. And then we use various tools. So for the sort of ad hoc analysis, personally I use Tableau a ton. Then the company has sort of standardized on Chartio as a way to do dashboards that everyone sees. And then our sort of real estate management software, we sort of built that ourselves using D3 and the various sort of visual libraries that are out there for charting and plotting and things like that.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about metrics and numbers and stuff. What's the importance of qualitative data for you guys? Or is it important?
For us, it's hugely important. I mean, we're constantly looking at tickets and feedback from our members because so much of it is how they feel, if the space is right, if it's hot, if it's cold. So it's trying for us, that's one of our challenges, is trying to turn qualitative into quantitative so that we can take action on it and sort of make physical adjustments.
Do Do you guys see any of that stuff, or is it important?
Yeah, it definitely matters. I mean, our design team does a lot of one-on-ones and small group user research studies as they're making changes to the app. We have a tasker council. These are the taskers who provide the services. They come in and they, are a cross-section of people. Some of them are like huge fans of TaskRabbit, have been with us from the beginning and like the diehards, and some of them are like the critics and are always mad whenever we make a change. And we have both of those people in the room, so whenever we're making a big change to the product, we bring them in, and you get the qualitative answers from them. For example, we're changing our tagline to "We do chores, you live life." We didn't know how the taskers were going to like it, and so we got them in a room, we put it up there, and we just listened for a whole hour to their reactions, and you can't get things like that from the numbers.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, I wish we had this one, one of our investors from HubSpot, and they have this like the happiness index for their customers, and I love that. Like, I wish we had something like that. Stacy mentioned NPS score earlier. We tracking that. I have some issues with NPS sometimes. I still think it's hugely valuable. Like, you learn so much. Orsa's in the room. She's running customer service at Buffer, and I'm sure she could come up here and talk about how we use the ticket data that we have and have that influence our product decisions and have go to a qualitative insight there. But to be very honest with you, I wish I had one metric just like MRR that I could counter to make sure that's how qualitatively well we are doing. The happiness index is something I've learned about. HubSpot is doing well. We have used NPS plus customer research and do all these other things that these two mentioned. But it's still a bit of a figuring out.
Yeah, just the reason I mention that is because just talk a little bit about what we do. I guess why they had me do monitoring is I actually run an accelerator that's focusing on like growth and distribution. Right. We're fairly known for that, and one of the things we talk about, we're like metrics and numbers are actually helpful because they tell you what's going on, but if you actually don't have any qualitative aspect of it, you actually don't understand the why of actually why these things are like, why these numbers are going up or down. And so having some combination of both, like I'm totally scared when somebody just has like qualitative data. I'm like, okay, this is not, you probably shouldn't do a startup.
Right.
But I'm also equally worried when all they have is numbers,
right,
and you don't have it's hard to sort of balance that data of just like you don't understand what's going on,
right,
at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I have strong opinions. So we have like 2 minutes left. I want this to be sort of like helpful for the companies. Do you have any suggestions that you would recommend, one word, couple sentences, that you wish you knew when you started off thinking about metrics and things that you think would be helpful for the audience? Anybody, take your time, have a think.
So I'll just say to really try to understand the core driver of growth for your business, especially in the beginning. And TaskRabbit has been around since 2008, and I think we danced around that a lot, and it was hard to really understand what was the ultimate core driver of growth for us. And it changes over time. In the beginning, it was fulfillment. We needed to make sure every match happened and it was a good experience every time. Otherwise, we weren't going to grow. But then it changed to tasks posted, meaning the number of people who show up at our site, decide they want to get done, complete the sign-up process, and post an actual task. And just getting down to what that core is will help you refocus when all the noise starts to come in, especially as your business starts to grow.
For us, it's having a real clear strategy for a data architecture. Especially a lot of the metrics for us span multiple departments. So a really simple for one is like the definition of a project. Right? One department calls it the entire building, the other department just calls it one floor, another department calls it, and then it becomes really difficult to track these things from end to end. And so whether we call it a data dictionary or something like that, but having a real clear information architecture that every department agrees on is critical, because then you almost can't measure.
And critical for scaling as well too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think at Buffer, if you think back, the one thing I wish I'd done more, I wish I'd leaned in more into the uniqueness of our own data. It's kind of similar to what Stacy talked about. It's like when you Google and you learn about data and you learn about the metrics and the R metrics and all this kind of stuff, you kind of look at certain generics charts from other companies and you try to model around that, and really leaning into that for yourself and being like, hey, our data looks different. Is that weird? And like, it took us a while to actually then be like, no, that's totally fine, right? Like at Buffer, we post stuff. We don't try and do tasks, right? So like, by nature, everything is going to look different. And it took us a while to really, lean into that enough and say like, we don't look at, acquisition as much as we do activation, or like traffic is not as important as it's like just being okay with like almost going against some of the generic ideas of data. There's a great talk, by the way, by Josh Ellman on that I can highly recommend. If you Google Josh Ellman retention or the only metric that matters or something like that.
Baller, yeah.
Yeah, that one's perfect. That really gave me the confidence to be like, oh, okay, this is cool. I can keep doing this. So
yeah, I think it was at one of our events. It was like the weapons of mass distribution,
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that was a great talk. It was awesome talk.
Yeah.
And I would say, my tip is that use some frameworks are actually helpful. So of course, I'm going to use my boss's framework is the R metrics. It's like acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue, of just like really understanding what stage you're at as a company, using as a framework to figure out your metrics around that. And so I think we're wrapping up, but I really want to thank you guys for a wonderful, wonderful, informative panel. Dave, Stacy, Leo, it's been a great honor, and thank you very much for listening.